The old adage is a win is a win is a win. But in this circumstance, is really anybody happy about BYU's victory over SMU unless you play on the BYU defense? Well, let's talk about it on POSTCAST.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first view and or listen to the day. And thank you to all of you once again who are everydayers with us right here on your original daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. This is a special edition. We do them after BYU games. We call them postcasts as we look back on the wins, losses, and everything in between for BYU football and BYU basketball. And as it stands, the BYU Cougars are 2-0 on the season by virtue of an 18-15 victory over the SMU Mustangs. Did I envision that scoreline going into this game? Absolutely not. Did I envision it being a close game? Sure. But it came about in the most crazy of ways. So we're going to start off by talking about the positives to take away from this game. I just named one of them. Your BYU Cougars are 2-0. Do not lose sight of that fact, everybody. I know that there's frustration around this team, especially after that game, but might I remind you, BYU's 2-0. They're undefeated. They are 1/3 of the way to bowl eligibility. Yes, that is indeed the case. They are 1/3 of the way there. The other situation I liked in this game is how legit is BYU's defense. The Jay Hill effect on BYU is in full effect, to use that play on words. He has got this team, maybe not the team, but he's got the defense believing that they can do anything. This was an explosive SMU team that they limited to 261 yards total in this game. Some of the top weapons that I was concerned with going into this game, RJ Maryland, the explosive tight end for SMU. What did he have? 1 reception, 2 yards. Brashard Smith, their speedster explosive running back that I was concerned could gash BYU. He ended up, 75 yards on 14 carries, 5.4 yards per carry. Healthy average, but 75 yards, you'll live with that. Jay Hill's defense absolutely bailed, and I mean bailed BYU's offense out in this game. They limited SMU to 5 field goals. They limited SMU to just 6 points, if I'm not mistaken, on their red zone possessions. They did everything within their power outside of one thing, scoring a touchdown of their own to get BYU this victory. What an impressive display it was from this BYU defense. Everybody across the board, from Tanner Wall at free safety all the way to John Nelson and Blake Mangelson at defensive tackle and everybody else out there on the field in between that, all of them had a role to play in this. I was extremely impressed with the way they went about things. Kevin Jennings, a fleet-footed quarterback. Remember, just last week, DJ Williams from Southern Illinois carved up this BYU defense for 121 rushing yards. Well, BYU learned from that. Kevin Jennings, after some early success, ends up getting balled up 9 carries, 38 yards overall. BYU holds him to a 47% completion percentage, as it appears that he has taken the reins of that QB battle there at SMU. Jay Hill is proving yet again that he is worth, as I like to say, every dime, nickel, and penny that you're paying him as BYU's defensive coordinator. And as I understand it, he's a very healthily paid coordinator at BYU. As I understand it, it's north of $1 million that BYU's paying him. And like I said, it's worth every single bit of that. What other things do we take away from this? Positives. I think that BYU can now rely on their defense to get them through these games. BYU's now 2-0. Remember, we talked all the time that BYU in the non-conference slate, if they went 3-0, it's probably a best-case scenario. 2-1 would have been acceptable. I would have thought going into this 3-game non-conference series that the one game BYU was most likely to lose was this road game at SMU. The FPI, we talked about it earlier this week, the Football Percentages Index put this as a smaller chance of BYU getting this win than winning at Utah later this season against the vaunted University of Utah. It's incredible to consider what BYU did in this game. They were a double-digit underdog, depending on which sportsbook you looked at. Our friends, obviously, at FanDuel, sponsor this podcast and the network, had BYU, last I saw, as a 10.5-point underdog. But I saw some lines out there that had BYU as much as a 2-touchdown, 14-point underdog. You went on the road as a double-digit underdog and got a win. That is supremely impressive that BYU pulled that off in spite of all the circumstances around this game. I think that BYU deserves to pat themselves on the back, particularly Jay Hill and the BYU defense. 8 days ago, Jay Hill was in the hospital having a procedure to put a stent in his chest, or 2 stents, in his chest, to bypass blockages in his arteries that caused a heart attack. That is a man, that is a myth, that is a legend that will be hard to surpass for BYU. Any of his players that ever want to complain about having it tough or hard or they're not happy, it doesn't matter. He's got a trump card over every single one of those guys, and he called an absolutely masterful, a masterful performance on the defensive side of the football. Well, in stark contrast to that was the BYU offense. Wasn't great. Can they build off this? Is there still hope for Jake Retzlaff? Well, let's try and make heads and tails of that as we roll on right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Now, we talked about FanDuel all the time, but the best part about FanDuel right now is they got a special offer for you, our listeners. Now through September 22nd, you can go to FanDuel.com/lockedon, bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket via YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a base YouTube TV plan, you can get all of the Sunday afternoon out-of-market games, and all you got to do is have a current form of payment, a Google account, and the best part is you can cancel it at any time. Think about it. $5, 3 weeks watching your favorite team, potentially if you live out of market, to watch your team play this season. Get on it today. Offer is only available through September 22nd. It's all courtesy of friends over at FanDuel. So once again, get to FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. If you want more of a well-rounded look at all things college football, make sure you check out the Locked On College Football podcast. Spencer McLaughlin, a dear friend of mine, does a great job covering all the big stories in college football. Really impressive stuff that I think that you would enjoy. So check it out. It's Locked On College Football, wherever you get your podcasts. It's available. Also available on YouTube. And of course, it is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. And it is your team every day. All right. The BYU offense left a lot to be desired in this game. They muster over 300 yards of offense. That's great. I guess all things considered, 336 yards overall, 202 yards passing, 134 yards rushing. Now, a week ago, BYU ran the ball 47 times for 179 yards, averaging 3.8 yards per carry. In this game against SMU, BYU ran the ball 35 times for 134 yards, and that average comes out to, you guessed it, 3.8 yards per carry. I am going to venture a guess that when Connor Pay joins the podcast next week, he is going to be very perturbed about the rushing attack for BYU, and actually took a 37-yard dash down the sideline from Miles Davis to raise that average, because that was the big run on the night, a 37-yard scamper for him on that option play that set up what was eventually the game-winning field goal for BYU. This BYU offense has got flaws to it, and I think it starts at the quarterback. Now, I will admit, I've been a champion of Jake Retzlaff. I thought he was going to be the quarterback for BYU, and, well, based on how everything went against SMU, it feels like he's still going to be the guy going against Wyoming. Trust me, we're going to get to your comments here momentarily. I would say 60+% of them deal with Jake Retzlaff, and the vast majority, at least 90% of those, if not 100% of them, want to see Jake Retzlaff benched, see Gary Bohannon. They want something different. I find that as a problematic idea, and let me explain. Here's the deal. Jake Retzlaff has got you to 2-0. He's had one really good performance against Southern Illinois. He's had one subpar performance. His 3 turnovers against SMU are completely inexcusable, but BYU won the game. If you were to go and bench him now and insert Gary Bohannon into the lineup against Wyoming, I feel like you would risk splitting the locker room. I'm not saying anything that I don't believe, because the situation is that this guy is getting results, and we talk about it all the time on this podcast. If you're a long-time everydayer, I talk about the fact that what do you want most of all from your team? You want your team to have more points than the other team at the end of the game. Simply put, you want your team to win. Everything else, the way it comes, it's extra, and it's but beyond that, it really is superfluous. Yes, it's something that it's beyond what you really care about, and that's your team winning more often than not. BYU's 2-0, and I expect that the Gary Bohannon cries for him to be BYU's QB1 are going to be very loud. They're going to be very, very vocal in this coming week and weeks to come if Jake Retzlaff continues to operate the way he is. I think the best scenario, this is just me speculating, is that Jake Retzlaff starts against Wyoming. But you see at least a series or two for Gary to get a feel for what he can do in this BYU offense. I feel like this coaching staff needs to get a feel for what Gary could offer to BYU in a game-like situation. Yes, he is a proven guy who's got a lot of starts under his belt. He's won a Big 12 title. He's played in a Sugar Bowl. He's got all those accolades on his resume. But you do not know how he's going to operate after more than a year, actually almost 2 years, not playing football. You need to, I think, insert him into this game against Wyoming, whether you have to manufacture an entire series for him or you find ways to insert him, just use him in various packages. You need to get a look at Gary Bohannon, the quarterback in 2024. And you got to get away from the fact that he's got to be the guy that was there at Baylor in, is it 21 or 22 when they went to that Sugar Bowl. He could be a fundamentally different player, and that could affect things if he were to essentially say BYU says, you know what, Jake, thanks, but we're going a different direction, and they insert Gary in there. If for whatever reason Gary were to fail and you had to pivot back to Jake Retzlaff, be a really, really tough sell, I think, to keep the locker room intact and keep everybody on the same page at that point. So BYU is still winning, and I expect that Jake Retzlaff will continue to start. That does not mean that it's okay for what BYU's offense looked like in this game. They need to go to the BYU defense and say, guys, that's our bad. Thank you for bailing our you-know-what's out in that game. You guys absolutely balled out, and we failed to hold up our end of the bargain. Did they do enough? Sure. If you want to count it as that, they did enough. The situation is it's not enough against better teams. SMU to me are frauds. And I don't mean that to be mean. I'm not trying to stick a needle into SMU, but they are fraudulent. Here's the deal. Anybody who thought that SMU was going to show up year one and win the ACC, because there were more than a few people out there that were speculating that the ACC could be the SMU's for the taking, that ain't happening. That SMU team, they don't got that type of caliber in them. Are they a good team? Yes, they've got weapons. They absolutely have weapons. But BYU's defense held down those weapons, and BYU's offense felt like did the bare minimum and scraped just by just enough, 18-15 to get the victory to push them into 2-0. Could this offense look a lot better next week against Wyoming against a G5 opponent? Yeah, it absolutely could. It actually could revert back to being more of what it was against Southern Illinois. But the concern is the week after that, when Kansas State comes to town in Provo, Utah, at LaVell Edwards Stadium for the first Big 12 game of the season, what are you going to say if this reverts back to what it was against SMU and Kansas State with what I think is a more complete team, a more bona fide Power 4 program that will absolutely make BYU pay more than SMU will? That's the concern you got to have for this BYU offense right now. And of course, it starts with Jake Retzlaff. The fumble, it gets stripped out. And I think from that point on in this game, and that was very early on in that game when that ball got stripped out, I never saw Jake Retzlaff settle in the rest of this game. He looked jumpy. He looked skittish. Use the term he's seeing ghosts. I think a lot of the stuff that's been circulating online and just in the overall community about him, how he's not going to quote unquote be the guy for BYU and he's not good enough to be the guy for BYU. I think that all got in his head and he was unable to get past it. He was never able to really kind of lock in and settle into this game. Is that going to be a long-term issue? TBD. But you have to, you cannot accept what he did with the football. He is a turnover machine. That's just a simple fact of the matter. And I wanted to believe. Aaron Roderick said that he never threw an interception and didn't have a turnover in spring camp. He had one giveaway in fall camp. And the belief was, wow, maybe he's cured all of his woes when it comes to turning the ball over. Foolish us, foolish me for believing that to be the case. Because the 3 turnovers he had, the 2 interceptions and the fumble, unacceptable. You cannot have that from your quarterback. So what are you going to do about it? Well, in theory, you would turn and rely on your running game. Oh, wait, LJ Martin got injured in this game, was on crutches midway through and had to hobble his way off the field after the game on those crutches. That doesn't indicate to me that LJ Martin's going to be back next week. And quite frankly, Hinckley Rapati and Miles Davis and even Enoch Nawahine with his late touchdown, none of them inspired that, hey, that guy's going to step up in the stead. You've got to go about, I think, fundamentally refocusing what this offense, the philosophy is. I know that Aaron Roderick takes a lot of barbs from Cougar fans out there. I get all of it. I believe that his philosophy of running to set up the pass is fundamentally flawed, especially in this circumstance. You need to throw to set up the run for BYU right now. You got to have Jake Retzlaff move the ball down the field. Remember, BYU's run game didn't really get going until they started hitting on deep balls over the top on Southern Illinois and forcing Southern Illinois to back off. You can guarantee that Wyoming, they're going to creep those safeties up next week and make Jake Retzlaff prove that he can make them pay with his arm. If they do that, they'll back off and BYU will have more success running the football. But until that happens, it's going to be tough sledding for BYU's offense. And once again, I'm a second guesser, as my good friend in radio, Jake Scott, likes to say. We're second guessers in sports media. If we were first guessers, we'd be coaches. But the situation is that we're sitting here talking about what is ailing this BYU offense, and it's just the quarterback play, not good enough. Losing your top running back, who I believe is far and away your best running back, because I don't think any of the other guys on the roster inspire any type of confidence right now. And it's nothing against them. The production is just not there. You got to find a way to generate some more offense. And I believe it may be that, the guy that is loose with the ball, speaking of Jake Retzlaff, you rely on him slinging the ball a little bit more down the field. Maybe you go more with that QB run game, because quite honestly, outside of the one drive that Jake had in that first half for the touchdown, when he went to that QB run game, and I talked about it earlier this week on the podcast, how Sol-J Maava Peters was a one-man wrecking crew against SMU in that New Mexico Bowl in December of 2022. Well, they went back to a lot of what worked in that game in 2022 in that second half. And remember, that was the most successful run, if you want to call it that, or most successful series or two that BYU had in that second half. You got to find new ways to manufacture your offense. And if that is going to require you to run Jake Retzlaff or maybe insert Gary Bohannon to run the ball as a QB option type guy, so be it. You got to find a way to find more offense out there on the field, because Kalani said it at halftime. I'm frustrated. We need to get some chunk plays. Well, he can complain into a microphone to the ESPN sideline reporter, but I got to believe that he's complaining in his headset to his offensive coordinator saying, hey, where are those deep shots? Why aren't we going down the field? Why are we not trying to release somebody down the field? Aaron Roderick is a Norm Chow disciple. He played for Norm Chow. And I know that Coach Chow, he believes this because he said it on my radio show that I work on for years. He believed in every quarter of every game, you had to take at least one, maybe two shots. And even if they were low percentage type plays, it got in the head of the defense. Hey, they're willing to go down the field. I didn't see much of that till very late in this game for BYU. And when they did, remember Keelan Marion was turning to the inside. That ball ended up going on the outside, and it was an absolute dime of a throw. And had Keelan Marion gotten his head around to the other side, maybe just a tad bit quicker, he might have hauled that pass in. But really beyond that, did you see many deep shots in this game? I didn't. I don't recall seeing them, and I will go back and rewatch this game as I always do, and I'll have my film review for you guys on Monday. But this offense right now looks fundamentally flawed, and I don't think there's ready-made answers right now. Like I said, the quarterback play was less than stellar, and I was expecting to maybe see a series from Gary in this game just to get a feel for what he could do. So maybe that comes next week against Wyoming. Maybe it doesn't come at all. Maybe Jake bounces back in a big way, and all of a sudden he's back in the good graces of Cougar fans with a big showing on the high plains against the Wyoming Cowboys. But right now, can you really bank on that? I don't think you can. Another thing you could hopefully be able to bank on is a powerful running game, but without what appears to be far and away your best running back, he's currently shelved due to injury, it appears. No ready-made answers for BYU on offense, and that is a concerning thing if you're a Cougar fan. All right. I have spent far too much time with my own thoughts on this postcast edition. So we'll roll through as many thoughts of yours as we can momentarily. Of course, that's how we do on postcast. The final stanza of the show belongs to you with your comments via social media on our Locked On Cougars Insider Group. And we'll get to those momentarily right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Now, Game Time is here for you guys no matter what type of events you want to go to. Theater, sporting events, comedy, music. No matter what you're into, Game Time has got the options for you guys. They have their picks, Game Time picks feature on their app now, which filters through all of the other tickets out there and finds you the best deals available to you. So you're not having to search through and hopefully, fingers crossed, find the right deal for you. The best part is also in the app with Game Time, you can go online, toggle the all-in pricing feature. So all you got to do, toggle all-in pricing, and you know exactly as soon as you're looking at those tickets what the price is going to be. You're not going to be floored by a 50% markup, it feels like, in fees at the end of the purchasing window, and all of a sudden be like, whoa, what am I paying that for? Toggle the all-in pricing and take advantage of it today. The best part about it is you can create an account today. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege. It's LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That's Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, of course. So check it out. Create your account today. Promo code Locked On College. Have 20% off. What time is it? Game time. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. If you've not done so already, join our Locked On Cougars Insider group. The best part about these in game now is I can have one-on-one conversations with y'all. We're texting back and forth. That's literally what it is. It's a texting ability to have one-on-one conversations with me, get my insights on the game. You can weigh in with your thoughts, and we can kind of go back and forth and banter. It's a really, really fun way to do that. Also passing along insider tidbits about BYU football and basketball, giving away tickets. We got it all for you guys. So check it out. It's the Locked On Cougars Insider group. There's a link in the show notes, whether you're watching and or listening to this, and join us there today. All right. Before we go on today's show, it's your guys' time to shine with your thoughts on the game. So we'll first go over to our Locked On Cougars Insider group, get some thoughts here. First comment here, I'm going to pull up. I'm just going to go randomly right here. Riker. The defense is legit. Holding a team averaging 50 points at home to 15 is absolutely insane. I want to know what the average starting field position was for SMU. What the average starting field position for SMU was too. Super impressive defensive performance. Offense needs some work. I think it's putting it lightly. I'll have to do some research on the average starting field position, so I'll check back with you on that, Riker. But that is true. SMU had a 9-game win streak going at home when BYU came to SMU. They were averaging, it's not just 50, it was like 53 and change in that 9-game home win streak. BYU limited them to 15 points and dominated defensively. You can't take that away from Jay Hill's crew. They were absolutely lights out. All right, other questions here. Gary, the offense looked awful. Give some credit to SMU, but a lot of questions remain. I think I alluded to that just a minute ago. There are still a ton of questions about this BYU offense. And yeah, SMU does deserve some credit. They made plays, obviously, because when you have a defensive lineman literally fall down, he pops back up, and Jake Retzlaff has just thrown a pass that's supposed to go to a screen, a tight end middle screen to Keanu Hill. The defensive lineman just plucks it out of the air. Big time play by that young man to make that play. But man, just brutal stuff. Laramie, the defense balled out. Nick, oh man, is there any hope with was you poop emoji offense? At the end of the day, A-Rod has seemed so overmatched for too long. I can't disagree with you because it's the offense, like I said, it's fundamentally flawed right now, and it's not good because it looked like a bit of a return, like people have mentioned, to the 2023 Jake Retzlaff, and you can't have that. Let's see here. Tyson, I've never really had a problem with Aaron Roderick, but I feel like his play calling tonight was abysmal. Okay. So you're turning on him, Tyson. I can understand that. Let's see. Spencer Gonzalez, incredible grit and discipline, which he said was Jake's word, won that game. So you know, Jake Retzlaff. Hard to tell how much talent SMU really has and the coaching ability they posed based off of their games. The defense was inspiring and offensively they had willpower. Hoping to see brighter and higher caliber of offensive output next game. I think that's a positive take, and I think all of us are hoping for that, Spencer, because trust me, I think the only person that enjoyed that game is Kyle Whittingham. That sounds weird to say, but that was a very Kyle Whittingham, like, yes, like a Kyle Whittingham sickos type win. He absolutely loves that stuff. Jake, by the way, a W is a W. Great. That is a W. You celebrate wins. Take the wins. You never throw those wins back. Let's see. Defense is just unbelievably elite. The offense, needs some work, but a win is a win. That comes from Brandon. All capable. Yeah, absolutely. Let's see other things. I agree with what the commentators say. Excuse me. I agree. So Carter says this. I agree with the commentators when they said this team will go as far as Jake takes them. Can't make boneheaded mistakes. again, there was boneheaded is a good term for it. If Jake can get out of his own way, BYU can play pretty good football. The problem is right now, he's kind of in his own head. And that's like, I have no inside knowledge. That's me speaking from the outside, but watching him in that game, it just felt like he was in his own head. And I think some of those bad memories from last year probably crept up. Bryce says this: BYU may go into conference play 3-0, but the offense and special teams have a lot of work to do. That's a good point. Special teams, the punter situation still is very much unsettled. Sam Vanderhaar, as well as Landon Rico. I want to say Ryan Rico, but it's Landon. Neither one of them really said, hey, I'm the guy at punter. Return decisions from Keelan Marion still remain curious on kick returns. So, yeah, special teams does need work. I agree with that. Jensen says this: defense is legit, but the offense is going to be a limiting factor. Well, for the time being, it absolutely is a limiting factor. It's just crazy to think about that. Robert asked this: how many sacks in TFL so far in 2024 versus 2023? I know sacks off the top of my head. BYU with the 3 they had against SMU is now up to 5 on the season. All of last year, BYU had, wait for it, 11 sacks. They're nearly halfway to that total through 2 games. That was 11 sacks in 12 games last year. They're going to blow right by that, it feels like. So, BYU got the win. Obviously, you celebrate that. Like I said, you never throw back losses. Or not, you throw back losses. You never throw back wins when it comes to winning in college football. But, like I mentioned, is really anybody content and happy with how things look right now if you're not a BYU defensive player? No. I still believe the BYU offense owes just a big thank you. They got to go say thank you to the BYU defense for bailing them out in that game. All right, a couple more thoughts here before we go. I just look at this, and it was a crazy circumstance in this game. All right, let's see. Scuttle says this, Scuttlebutt1. It's Gary time and Laramie. We need to enter conference play with a solidified QB. If it's Retzlaff, this offense is screwed. He's shown who he is, and today was a regression to the mean. Last week was the outlier. I'm going to say this, Scuttle, prepare to be disappointed. I just don't see them making the switch to Gary full time this week. Could I be wrong about that? Sure, I absolutely could be wrong, but I just don't see it happen. Peyton Butcher says this: how is Retzlaff better than a QB that won a Big 12 championship 2 years ago? Once again, I think you need to divorce yourself from the Gary Bohannon that won that Big 12 championship and led them to the Sugar Bowl and the Gary Bohannon of today. We don't know what the Gary Bohannon of today looks like, truthfully, under the lights right now. So I think you need to divorce those two things from one another. Mark Dalton Dunn, Jake Retzlaff, take care of that ball, ! It's true. Anybody who talks to him, I'm sure, is saying the exact same thing. He's got to take care of that football. It's really, really tough. So I don't know. It's just, it feels like, and I'm just scrolling through some of these comments, and a lot of them are redundant at this point because it's a lot of just the same stuff being thrown at us. But you got to figure out, and you got to find a new way to go about things on offense. Do I have the perfect answer? No, because if I did, I'd be making a lot more money than I'm doing in podcasting and radio right now. But we'll see what happens. Laramie, trip to the high plains. BYU going back to a place that, let's just put it this way, the fan base, they loathe the Cougars. Yeah. I did have a question asked about that. By the way, it was, I think, one of our last things sent in on the Locked On Cougars Insider group. Let's see if I can find this here. Oh, yeah, Byron. How many BYU fans did BYU have at the game, and what was the total attendance? I have not seen a total attendance number, so I don't have that. But Spencer Linton, who was there on site in Dallas, said he estimated 10,000 BYU fans. I had a friend who was in the stands there, and I said, hey, give me a percentage. He said 35 at worst, 35% BYU fans at worst. He thought it was more 45% of the fans in attendance were BYU fans. So you know what? Let's finish on a positive note. Cougar Nation, yet again, y'all showed up. You were loud, you were proud, and the Cougars, for all their faults, delivered a W for you, and they are 2-0. Once again, I'm going to go back and rewatch this tape. Hopefully have some notes for you guys on what maybe can be improved coming up on a Monday, on a film review Monday of the podcast. So stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, thank you for all of your support. Thank you for being everydayers here on the podcast. Thank you for making it your first listen. It's late. Wow. First listen and first view of the day. And of course, until next time, this has been the Locked On Cougars podcast.